Hello and welcome to Embraer's 2020 market forecast. At times during this pandemic, it has felt almost impossible to forecast anything further than a few days away. However, there are now clear trends that are going to have a significant impact on the global industry. In the 10-year forecast released today, we reveal 4 key trends that are reshaping our travel patterns and demand for new aircraft, as well as the numbers we see in each segment and in each region over the coming 10 years. We're joined today by Arjan Meijer, President and CEO of Embraer Commercial Aviation, and Rodrigo Silva Asuva, VP Marketing, Embraer Commercial Aviation. Rodrigo will take us through the market forecast, and we will then have questions with Arjan and Rodrigo. My name is Guy Douglas. I'm hosting this event today, and I look after communications for our commercial business. We'll take your questions at the end. You can submit your questions via the Q&A button, which is the icon that looks like a speech bubble that has a question mark in it. If you can, please identify yourself and your publication in your questions. Now I'll hand over to Rodrigo to take us through the forecast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you all for taking our time to watch this presentation. We have been publishing our outlook since 2004, and I should say that this year is really special because we have prepared our outlook in the middle of the biggest crisis that the industry has ever seen. And while it has been, of course, very difficult, and we can discuss, right, the level of uncertainty that is still in the market, we do believe that there are some indications and some trends that can help us to deliver our vision for the industry over the next 10 years. And to start, I should say that this outlook, the presentation that I'm going to give, is based on 2 fundamental ideas. The first one is that commercial aviation industry will be smaller. This is a consensus in the industry. It will take years for the industry to come back. Some people say 23, 24, 25. And when it comes back, we believe that the growth rate will be significantly lower than what we had before, leading to a smaller industry. So this is the first part. The second part is that it will also have a different shape. So changes in the global trade flows, changes in passenger behaviors, for sure will lead to changes in the air travel and in the passengers flow, leading to a different industry. So different size and different shape. And all these, of course, will cause fundamental changes in the profile that we see of the global fleet today. So let's start talking about the context of the crisis and what we have been considering for this presentation. So first, about the virus itself, we see that we will continue to have these interruptions in the passenger flow, with governments imposing restrictions in different countries in different moments in time until the vaccine is widely available, which we don't expect before, let's say, mid-3rd quarter next year. Because of this, of course, there is a greater impact on the global economy, and as a result, also in air travel, delaying the recovery of the industry. The other element that is important to mention is a slowdown in the international trade. So because of all the disruptions that we had, this has slowed down the economic activity, and therefore you have lower economic activity. This will result also in a lower demand for air travel. Debt and insolvency. Of course, we saw how much stimulus was necessary to keep the economy running. This has stretched the balance sheet from both the government and the private sector. We believe that this will have consequences over the next years. So it's not only about the short-term impact, but also about the, let's say, mid-long-term impacts of this lack of credit, which will for sure affect the level of trade and consumer confidence. And last but not least, very important, especially for aviation, the pandemic and the crisis caused by it had unbalanced, right, unequal impact on different levels of the population. The poorest population, the lower skilled workers, they have been impacted more than the high income population. And for us, this has a huge impact, not only socially speaking, but aviation has grown a lot based on the increase of the middle class. And this, because of this loss of the income that we had on the poorest level of people, will reduce the rate where middle class was growing and accessing air travel. So all those elements lead us to an impact on GDP that is fundamentally different from what we had before. So 4.5% is more than twice the impact that we had during the global financial crisis. And it was also different because it impacted the entire, all the regions. And so it's the crisis that we are living, it's a completely different level of impact and also different because of the impact in all the regions of the world. And the result of this is that we have this drop on the GDP forecast looking long term. Here we are seeing a 10-year forecast. We see a drop into 2020, but the recovery also takes long, right? And the average growth rate that we had in our previous forecast, 2.9, and now is reduced by, to 2.4, resulting in a global GDP in 2029, after 10 years, that is 5% lower than what we had in the previous forecast. And as you know, lower GDP has a direct impact on the demand for air travel. So we see that this crisis is different because of the level of impact, and different also because it will extend over the next years. Now, talking specifically about aviation demand, here we have a chart that shows the RPK evolution since 1980s. And we can see the different crises that we had and the drop in RPK in each one. So in some cases, we just had a stabilization, not actually a reduction in demand. In 9/11, in the financial crisis, we did have an impact, a reduction between 1 to 2%, but nothing is compared to the 60% that we are seeing in 2020. So we normally would see this curve and talk how resilient the industry is to different crises. But we believe that this one is very different. As we see in the chart, it's unlikely that the industry will behave just like before after such an impact on all players, airlines, OEMs, suppliers, airports. So it for sure, we are talking about a different crisis and therefore a different level of recovery. So now going specifically towards our forecast. So here what we show in gray is our previous forecast, our 2019 numbers in terms of global RPK. And in blue, we show what is the current forecast. So again, we can see here the drop in the beginning and the recovery more or less in 2023, 2024, but growing at a lower rate than what we had before. We see at the end of the period 2029, the number of RPKs being 19% smaller than what we had in our previous forecast. And we can see two distinct periods here. One that goes from now, where we have the recovery from the pandemic itself and a lot affected by the restrictions related to health. This period goes, let's say, now 2020, 2021, 2022. And until 2024, we see the industry recovering, let's say, to similar levels as pre-crisis, similar levels as 2019. And between 2024, 2025, and 2029, then we see a second period of growth, however, at a slower pace than what we had before. In general, let me just go back here. In general, we are talking about a growth that is roughly 1% is lower than what we had before. Now we talk a lot about the size of the industry and the elements that take us to consider that the industry will be significantly smaller. Now let's talk a little bit about the shape of the industry and how the long-term trends can affect how the industry will adapt to this new reality. The first long-term trend is right sizing, and we have been hearing a lot this word recently. It's about the companies right sizing, it's about the industry right sizing, it's about OEMs right sizing, and it's about airlines right sizing, both in terms of number of aircraft and in terms of aircraft size. And one evidence, and for each of the trends that I'm going to show here, I want to show you some evidences of what we are forecasting. This chart shows a comparison of the performance of a larger aircraft, narrow body, and aircraft smaller jets up to 150 seats. Of course, the numbers here are a lot affected by the MAX, the 737 MAX situation, but still the comparison is valid. So what we see here is that the number of orders in 2020 of narrow bodies compared to the average of the last 5 years is only 36%. And the jets up to 150 seats, 52%. So in terms of deliveries, the market has been accepting more, let's say, the jets up to 150 seats rather than narrow body. The same analysis we can see in terms of cancellations. And here I think it's perhaps an even bigger indication, because on the deliveries we can talk about the difficulties of MAX being delivered, but on the cancellations, it means that customers are not seeing the need for that aircraft anymore. It's not about postponements, it's about cancellations. And in this regard, again, the level of cancellations of the segment up to 150 seats has been significantly smaller than what happened in the narrow body. And the result in terms of net orders is that while narrow bodies are very negative, we still were positive. Even in the middle of the worst crisis, there is a positive number of net orders. And I'm showing data, but we see also important people in the industry echoing what many people are saying. So here we see the CEO of Delta, Ed Bastian, saying that the industry will take 2-3 years to recover and is likely to be smaller, right? And another interesting quote from the CEO of Lufthansa Group is even more representative of what we are communicating here. The pandemic offers our industry a unique opportunity to recalibrate, and this is what we believe is going to happen, right? Some people are talking about the great reset, a significant change in the profile of the industry. To question the status quo, and instead of striving for growth at any price, to create value in a sustainable and responsible way. To create value in a sustainable and responsible way is all about right sizing. It's all about using the right aircraft size for the demand that is out there. And with a lower demand, we believe this will drive the average aircraft size downwards. So right sizing is the first. The second one is regionalization. So because of all the restrictions and disruptions that we saw during the pandemic, we see companies turning inwards, right, and establishing new flows of their business. So here again, I'd like to show some evidences. The first is a chart showing the percentage of imports in relation to the world GDP. And we can see that since the financial crisis in 2008, it was already decreasing. So that movement of globalization that we saw since the 1990s was already decreasing, right? Some people calling it globalization, was already decreasing before the pandemic, but because of the pandemic, we see that this decrease will be accelerated. And on the right, we have some examples of governments rethinking their strategy in terms of a supply chain. So what is going to happen with this? Probably we'll see the domestic market is strengthening in relation to the international market, and this, of course, also have consequences for the fleet strategy from airlines. The third, and perhaps one of the most important trends, is a new passenger behavior. And here we'll talk about three main fronts. We'll talk about changes related to technology, to health concerns, and environment. But the three combined will probably generate different flows, right? The different patterns, different demand for passengers in the future. So here I have a map showing those three fronts. I would say the most clear one that we are actually living right now, right? The extensive use of digital technology to improve communication. This we see having two effects in terms of the passenger behavior. One, of course, is a wider adoption of those virtual tools, accelerated in comparison to what we had before. And this, of course, reduces the demand for air travel, especially from business travelers. On the other hand, we see that a lot of people that used to commute and had to live closer to their jobs in the big centers, perhaps we will see a decentralization and going to smaller cities. And instead of a daily commute inside the city, perhaps we will see short flights between secondary airports and big centers once, twice a week, 3 times, and people prioritizing the quality of life in smaller centers. So this is something that we are already seeing in both cases, right? The wide adoption of the communication tools and this trend of decentralization from the large urban centers. But we see also, as I mentioned before, impacts in terms of health concerns. This is very visible in the short term because of the restrictions, right? We either cannot travel or we don't want to travel because of the level of contamination in the cities, right? The level of still the virus very high. But we see that this will have also impacts in the long term. Because what's happening is that because of the restrictions in terms of air travel, new destinations, domestic destinations, the new destinations inside the country that before were not prioritized, were not known by the passengers, they became more important now. And as passengers, as the people are exposed to those new destinations, they know more about it. It's possible that this will become actually new flows, right? Will represent new flights that will persist even after we have the vaccine available. So there are short-term impact for sure, of course we see, but there are also, we see probably long-term impacts. Some people also preferring to direct flights instead of going through large airports. This will increase the number of point-to-point flights. And again, once passengers will have the access to direct flights, perhaps it will be more difficult for airlines to come back and go to a one-stop trip. So, and finally, regarding environment, we see this is also a trend that was there before, but we see being accelerated. Passengers thinking twice about flying, so being more conscious. This reduces in general the number of passengers, and when they fly, they will probably look for more eco-friendly solutions, either talking about airlines. So we see some movements in terms of classifying airlines in terms of how eco-friendly they are, but also in terms of different means of transportation and the development of more sustainable solutions. So sustainable airfields and development of new propulsion systems to address this demand from the passengers from the public for more sustainable solutions. So we see those three elements in the new passenger behavior. Finally, about environment itself, I just talked about environment, but it was more related to the passenger behavior. I would like to talk about the environment also from a different perspective. In this chart, we show on the left examples of how the extensive support that governments have given to airlines to survive during this crisis, and this is especially true in Europe. They do not come for free, right? Governments require some compromise, and one of the items on the top of the agenda is the environment. So in many cases, we see governments influencing future airline decisions, including fleet, towards more sustainable solutions. But it's not only government, it's not only about the public sector, is also about capital markets. So at the right, we have some statistics on how more important the ESGs have become recently. It's consistently shown that the companies that are better position in terms of environment, social, and governance, they perform better than other companies. This has been confirmed by investors, which in recent years have preferred to invest in those type of companies. This, of course, facilitates the access to capital from those companies, and also reduce the cost of capital for those companies. So it's also becoming an economic factor to consider the environment, to take more concrete actions related to environment. And again, here we believe that will have influence in some airline decisions. Fleet for sure. A great example is the acceleration of the replacement of older and less efficient aircraft. So now talking about forecast results. So we finally arrived to actually our forecast, and the forecast, as I mentioned before, this year we are doing is a 10-year forecast, 2020 to 2029. And our forecast for aircraft up to 150 seats in total is 5,500 airplanes delivered in the next 10 years. This is divided in roughly 1,080 turboprop aircraft and 4,420 jets. So let's say roughly 1,100, 4,400 planes in terms of turboprops and jets, and 75% of this demand is driven by replacement. So replacement plays a big role in this projection here, 25% related to growth. And this demand is to address the restoration of the network post-COVID. So we see that this size of airplane has been key for airlines to use during the crisis, and we see that as they rebuild their network, they become especially important, and we see a part of the demand driven by this increase in connectivity and restoring the network. The second rationale is right sizing. that I mentioned. So this we see across the globe. We see from many different customers actually looking with much more, let's say, emphasis on this size of aircraft as they see the demand coming down. Direct replacement, I already said, right? This is driven by not only the natural retirement of airplanes, but also because of the importance of environment. Regional aviation development in some regions. This is the case of China. This is the case of India, Latin America, and finally the replacement of smaller aircraft, jets from 50 to 70 seats, and also turboprop. So this is, let's say, is the big picture of our forecast, 5,500 airplanes over the next 10 years. And if we divide these in the regions, we see that Asia Pacific is the region that will drive the biggest demand for this. 31% of the 5,500 airplanes, so roughly 1,700 airplanes, especially driven by right sizing. The development of a hub and spoke system, we see this especially in Europe, in China. And the development of a secondary airports in other parts of Asia as a change in the balance between hub and spoke and point to point. So strengthening, let's say, hub and spoke in China is strengthening point to point in other parts of Asia. The next region is North America, with 1,600 airplanes, 29% of the demand, also driven by right sizing. In North America, we have a special element that is present in some of the scope clauses by the US airlines, which is the small narrow body, right? Typically represented by 190, 195 E2, for instance. And as we see this change in the level of demand, we believe that this concept of the small narrow body will become even more important. And of course, the RJ replacement. There are several 50-seaters and 76-seaters to be replaced over the next years. The third region is Europe and CIS, 25%. Also a lot of right sizing here, right? Significant lower level of demand, and the connectivity during the pandemic was really affected. And we see this size of airplane being key to restore that. And also present in other regions, but for sure, even more stronger in Europe is the replacements driven by the environment. So a lot of acceleration of replacements driven by environment concerns. And then finally, we have Latin America and Africa, both with a strong presence also of right sizing, right? We see today load factors much lower, and we see that to develop the regional connectivity, which is a demand both in Africa and in Latin America, this smaller aircraft size will be key. In Latin America, I would mention especially Brazil has a strong demand to develop the regional connectivity as we improve the infrastructure. So with this, I believe I finish the presentation. Before I hand over to Guy, I just would like to thank you all for watching, and also thank the entire market strategy team of Embraer, who has done a really outstanding job to put this study together so I could present this to you. Thank you. Guy, please.
Thank you, Arjan. Thank you, Rodrigo. Right. We have a few questions that have come through, not very many. Please do remember to identify yourself and your publication if you are logged on anonymously. But before we go to questions, Arjan Meyer, our President and Chief Executive Officer, has a few comments to make. So I shall hand over to Arjan and then we'll go directly into questions. So please post your questions as soon as you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Rodrigo and Daniel, for bringing this presentation to us. Welcome, everyone. It's very great to see so many people here on the call today, and to share with you the 10-year forecast. We'll go to some questions first because I don't want to burn the clock in repeating all the messages that Rodrigo just shared. What I would say is that I should say what goes around comes around, only much stronger and more urgently. If you look 20 years back, we talked about right sizing. We brought the E-Jets to the market, and we've been telling that story to the market for many years. Now, of course, in the bullish growth over the years since 2008 to 2019, we saw a trend to adding more seats into the market and bigger aircraft. But we really see that trend is going to change going forward. We see much more focus on right sizing again. You might say right sizing 2.0 in the sub 150 seat segment. And we believe with the 175 E1 and the E2 family, we have a great set of products as Embraer to come to the market. So I think that's in conclusion to the numbers that Rodrigo just brought to us. We see over 1,000 turboprops in the next 10 years demand. We see 4,420 jets in the next 10 years, a total of 5,500 aircraft. And compared to the previous period, we see 25% growth and 75% replacement. So those are impressive numbers for the sub 150 seat segment. So I'll leave it at that for now. I'm pleased to be here, and Guy, I'll hand over to some questions, and I'm most happy to say a few more words at the end. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Arjan. So the first question we have, I'm going to add another question to this. The first question will go to Arjan. Is the reintegration of commercial aviation already concluded? And I'll add to that a further question that we had from someone else. Is commercial aviation up for sale?
Yeah, Guy, I've had that question many times before. I think we're very clear, and I've been very clear to several press here on the call today as well. Commercial aviation is no longer for sale. In our strategic plan for the next 5 years, we are clearly looking at getting partnerships, doing programs together, working on services together. But commercial aviation is no longer for sale. We took it out of the shop window. We went a step much further. We reintegrated commercial aviation back into Embraer. We completely restructured the company over the last 5 months. We redefined our strategy, and we really brought everything back together. We're not done yet. We still have some challenges on the IT side and some other things to go through, but I think we've made some very strong steps already, and we're looking forward to finish this over the period ahead. But just to be clear, commercial aviation not for sale, fully integrated back into Embraer.
Okay, many thanks, Arjan. The next question comes from Guillermo Matias. We heard recently that air traffic would re-establish in 3 to 4 years. Why do you see commercial aircraft not returning to regular levels after 4 years or so? Rodrigo, that question to you.
No, we do see returning in 3 to 4 years. Actually, our forecast is that globally speaking, the demand shall return to 2019 levels in 2024. So we do see reaching that level. However, growing at a lower rate. So when we do the forecast for 10 years, at the end of the period, this represents a reduction of 19% compared to our previous forecast. So it's not that we will not reach the demand levels of pre-crisis. We will, but it will take a while. And after that, our projections is for a lower, smaller demand than what we had before. And this is why we say that there will be a right sizing, because when airlines are doing their fleet planning for 15, 20 years, that's the projection that they will be seeing. And they will be seeing a reduction in demand, in our view, of roughly 20%.
Thank you, Rodrigo. The next question to Arjan. What is the latest news on the E175-E2? Is this aircraft ever coming into service? This is unfortunately an anonymous question. We don't know who answered this one.
Well, the fact that it's anonymous is not a problem, Guy. I'll answer it, no problem. The 175, earlier this year, we have communicated to the market that the 175 will come to the market. It is a bit later than we anticipated before, but we're now targeting the second half of 2023. As a matter of fact, we're in full swing with the process. So we have a prototype flying around. So we're fully committed to the aircraft. And maybe while I get the chance here, we see the 175-E2 as an integral part of the E2 family. The family of the E-jets covered the 170 all the way up to the 195. Obviously in the E2 family, the 190 E2 is the same size. The 195 E2 is quite a bit bigger than the old 195. But the 175 E2 still covers the smaller part of the segment. And we believe that there's a good market for that, and we're committed to that aircraft.
Okay, thank you very much, Arjan. The next question is from Ayushi from SP Publications in India. Hi, what are Embraer's further plans with regards to turboprops, and why are you thinking of reviving them? That question to Rodrigo, sorry.
Oh.
Okay, so yes, we see a reasonable demand for turboprops going forward. During my presentation, you may recall I talked a lot about regional development of regional aviation, importance of connectivity, and this is addressed in many regions, especially in India, by turboprops. So we see a robust demand for this size of aircraft, this type of aircraft, and we see that the offers that are there today are all old technology. And so there is a big opportunity to come to the market to bring an aircraft that is more efficient, that is faster, that is more comfortable for passengers, more environmentally friendly compared to other options. So we are pursuing, we are studying this possibility. We are talking to partners that may be interested in investing in this program to try to make it viable and bring to the market again a new machine, again a very efficient aircraft to help airlines to increase profitability.
Thank you, Rodrigo. And on the same topic from Jens Flatto of Aviation Week, can you give more details about how you think a 50-seat regional jet and turboprop replacement will play out? And what about the size of the market for such a potential new turboprop? And in addition to that, an anonymous question, is the turboprop really called E3?
So let me start with this one. No, the answer is no. The turboprop is not called E3. We don't have a name for this this product yet. But Actually, the replacement of 50-seaters turboprops and jets is one of the markets that we are seeing for this airplane. So our turboprop is a large turboprop, right? We are still analyzing different possibilities in terms of size, but in generally speaking, we are talking between 70 and 100 seats. And we see that a lot of upgauge from 50-seat turboprops will happen. The other possibility that is, we believe it's a big upside for this program would be the replacement of 50-seaters in United States. Because in some cases, the scope clauses is still limited to 50 seat, the size of the aircraft that can be flown by network airlines. And the turboprop can replace those 50-seaters with a much more comfortable cabin and much more efficiently. So the main restriction today for North America not to use turboprop is the, I believe, is the bad perception that exists today on the passenger experience regarding flying on turboprop. But in our case, we are considering a cabin that is as comfortable as an E-Jet, which is a benchmark in terms of comfort. It's quieter than the current offer, so and with less vibration. So it's a completely different level of proposition that may take airlines to rethink this, let's say, paradigm of the turboprop in the United States. And if that happens, we are talking about additional hundreds of airplanes for the business case of this program.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Rodrigo. The next question is from Doug Cameron of the Wall Street Journal. I'll hand it initially to Arjan for a few comments and then perhaps to Rodrigo for some further detail. This is Doug's question. What assumptions are you making about how business travel develops, which in turn influences hub flows? Do you assume it will be lower in percentage terms permanently? And a follow-on question about our colleagues in executive jet, and is there a knock-on effect on private jet demand? So Arjen, if you could start with that and then hand to Rodrigo.
Yeah, first of all, Doc, thanks for the question. Yeah, obviously there's a lot of debate about what the effect is on passenger behavior out of COVID. Normally we kind of look at history, what the future will bring, but I think with a crisis like this, that's quite unpredictable. But we have done a lot of analysis on that. We believe that there will be a change in behavior, and there will likely be a different. Well, as Rodrigo has mentioned, there will be a different supply chain, more inshoring. People may start to live further away from the office. So there's going to be different behavioral patterns. So we expect some business travel to disappear because people are used to the digital world. They might do more meetings virtually. From my personal perspective, I actually long back to meet the people instead of sitting behind the screen. So I also think a lot of people will go back outside and meet people. But we do believe there will be some business travel that will disappear. We also believe that there will be some business travel coming back. Overall, probably, and I'll let Rodrigo speak about that a little bit more, but overall, probably initially a lower number than we've seen before. But of course, the growth trends will then over time bring that back. But Rodrigo, maybe you want to add a little bit more color to the numbers.
Yes, I would say, Arjan, that in general, when thinking about the international traffic, for instance, so the business international traveler, I think it's expected to be in a lower volume, right? In absolute numbers, is expected to be lower. When we go to the domestic market, it's a little bit more difficult to predict because we have some forces that lead us to think that the number will be lower. You know, just the virtual meetings and the virtual tools reducing the number of trips. However, as you mentioned, we see this strengthening of the domestic market, giving some extra, bringing extra demand in terms of business traveler, and also this working from home also bringing a different dynamics from now some people commuting once, twice a week to their work instead of living closing to their job. So I think domestically is more difficult to predict. Perhaps a slight decrease. We believe international is that we would suffer more from this reduction of the business traveler.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. We only have 6 minutes left and we have a last minute rush on questions. So I'll ask you to be concise with your answers from now on. The next question is an anonymous one. It is expected, and it's for you, Rodrigo, in the next years it is expected a huge surplus of pre-owned aircraft due to the COVID crisis. This could pressure sales of new aircraft. How do you expect Embraer to overcome this scenario? Thanks.
Yes, that's right. We do see that movement, and that's one of the factors affecting our forecast. We believe that in general there is already a surplus of aircraft this year. Next year, perhaps it's still in 2022. And this part of those aircraft will be retired earlier. So typically what we saw in previous crises is that some of the less efficient aircraft will be retired and will not come back, right? Others will come back slowly, but we see that our segment is less affected by this because the use of smaller aircraft is being bigger. So our aircraft is returning to service, let's say, earlier. And as airlines think about replacing their aircraft, in some cases, you're taking decisions not only for the short term, 1-2 years, but to have a fleet that now you're gonna replace and think about the new type for the next 15-20 years. We see a lot of right sizing already in the sales campaigns that we are living. So I think it is a threat for sure. It affects the number of deliveries from all manufacturers. In general, we see that because of the right sizing effect, it affects less the segment up to 150 seats than larger narrow bodies. Arjen? Don't know if you want to comment anything.
No, nothing to add there. No.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. This one is from Greg Polek of AIN and is for you, Arjen. Would the new turboprop require a clean sheet engine, or are you talking with engine OEMs about adopting existing projects?
Yeah, thank you for that question. For the turboprop, at this moment, we are talking about existing platforms. And allow me to elaborate a little bit more on that, because I think the expectations from the market on new technology, on this size airplane and this size of range that we want to bring to the market. Embraer is, over the years, has always been committed and has always delivered the most sustainable product to the market. We've done it in the past. I think we've proven that with the E2, which is the most efficient aircraft in the narrow body segment today. That's why we're talking about the TP in the first place. We think we can bring a more efficient platform, a better platform for the passengers. But we have to be fair that the development of hybrid electric, and that's where we expect the breakthroughs to come in the short term, that is not ready to operate this segment. Maybe just two numbers that we've been flying internally. If we would have like up to 5% hybrid energy on this aircraft, we would probably have to increase the operating cost of that aircraft by 15%. So at this point in time, it's costing a lot of money to get a little bit of fuel efficiency and CO2 reduction on a platform like this. Let alone trying to get to a fully battery powered aircraft. I mean, we're starting small. We're starting with our smallest crop duster aircraft flying electric in 2021. We're working with Embraer X and Uber Elevate on a urban air vehicle, which could be up to 4 persons. Really small, fully electric, small amount of passengers, small range. But from there to step to a 70 to 100 turboprop aircraft, that will take many years to evolve, and the technology is not there yet today. So in short, the answer is we'll use existing technology, but I also want to portray a little bit of a picture of where we are today, and that if we want to wait for that, we will not see a new turboprop come to the market for quite a while. Rodrigo, anything to add? Because we had long discussions about this.
No, Arjan, it's all correct. I think what we have established as our policy at Embraer in terms of new development is to always bring to the market the most possible, the most efficient possible aircraft at a time, right? And we see that today we are able to bring a more efficient turboprop to the market. And as technology matures, we are also looking at future solutions using hybrid and electric propulsion in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. That draws to a close our event today. A replay of this session will be available from our website shortly. Unfortunately, we didn't get through all the questions, but I think we covered most of the topics. Thank you very much for taking part today. Hopefully we won't have to, hopefully the next one of these that we do will be face-to-face, back in the real world again. Once more, thanks all and goodbye.